So, Erica, welcome to Square Peg Round Hole.
Thank you.
This is it's an interesting podcast, and I love the topic that you suggested because it takes me completely out of my expertise.
Great.
I might be a expertise in one side of it, right?
Probably, I
And
would say so.
I don't know that I'm an expert. If I'm an expert, it might be because I'm just ignorantly fell into it, not because aspired to it. But I was just reviewing your email, and in light of what we said before we, started in this conversation,
hmm
I'm going to want to know a little bit on how your new work environment
hmm
may or may not impact in a positive or negative way, or maybe it doesn't have an impact at all, as we are discussing what it means to be a black woman in a white dominated workspace or
hmm
space,
hmm
or can we just say world?
Yeah, I would actually say that it's probably world than it is, or and when I say kind of workspace, I mean field.
Okay.
The field of work that I do
Okay.
is very much dominated.
Okay. So I'm going to back up just a minute because
Okay.
we've only had this conversation once, you and I, in Colorado a
hmm
couple years ago.
Yeah.
So I could have already stuck my foot in my mouth and don't even know it by saying being a black woman in a white dominated male space. And you actually wrote, a woman of color. Is there a right or
Oh,
way,
sure.
wrong way for me to say that?
um, for me, no.
But for
There's
some people, yes.
um
That's a question, not a statement.
Right. Yeah, I would say maybe.
Okay.
For me, I feel very comfortable saying black. I feel very comfortable saying woman of color because I think it gives me the opportunity to broaden my perspective with
That's
and
good because I feel
like
very
be in
comfortable saying
solidarity
what
with.
I'm good with saying white male. So I'm okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think that being a woman of color puts me in a broader. I'm kind of representing a broader group of people when I
Yeah,
say woman of color because I could be Asian American, I could
sure.
be
No,
East Indian.
that makes a lot of sense. So we're not just talking about one specific race, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Though I will
so
speak from
that
my
does broaden
perspective.
it. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no. And I loved it. I was actually telling my son today when he asked about what the conversation was going to be. He said this should be fascinating to
Oh,
have an
good.
authentic conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we talk about. Um, I was actually thinking about an hour ago, as I was walking through our building with an insurance adjuster, thinking about our
hmm
conversation, square peg round hole. I bet you sometimes can really feel like the title of this podcast, can't you?
Mm. Yeah, I would definitely say that I could feel like that, have felt like that. Um, a majority of a lot of my experience growing up, to be quite honest, I think it actually started before entering into this specific field of youth ministry or youth missions that I'm in currently. Um, so I grew up in New York City, and I was born to a West Indian family. So my mom was born in Barbados.
Okay.
She moved to the United States when she was 5. My dad, his family is from a small island called Turks and Caicos. Are you
Yep.
familiar with the
Very
Turks and
familiar.
Caicos?
Never been there. Always wanted to been to Barbados, not been to
Okay.
Turks and Caicos.
Okay. I've never been to Turks and Caicos either, which is crazy. My dad is like, you need to get there. Um, so anyway, his family's from there. Then went to the Bahamas, and then after the Bahamas, they came to the United States. My dad was the first of his 8 siblings born in the United States. So he was born in Brooklyn also. So I grew up in a family that working in the islands before they came, owned their own homes before they came to the United States, came to Brooklyn, New York, major melting pot. Um, Came to the United States and right away owned their own homes. experience economic success as Black people in the United States. And so, like, fast forward to my parents having children. For my parents, it was kind of always this kind of, we are, there's nothing that we can't achieve. We will always be successful, because their story was like a lot, or came from success for them as Black people in the United States coming from the islands. And there's like a whole lot of history you can read all about, like West Indian culture and people who came from the West Indies to the United States. And I grew up in a very, like, I always say, like, my public school, PS 255 in Brooklyn, was like the United Nations. Like, I literally look at my elementary school pictures and I was like, gosh, there's like every nation represented in this one picture. But anyway, my parents were very much like, we will succeed, we will do well. And for them, part of success was like moving up and out of the city. And so we moved from Brooklyn, New York to one of the wealthiest counties in New York State, Westchester County, when I was in 5th grade. So this is like Westchester County, like the Clintons have a place in Westchester County. And we moved into, there's definitely places in Westchester County that are a little bit more diverse. But the town we moved to we were like the one of probably 3 or less Black families living in that community. And so for me, for my parents, the message was always, you don't know what people might think of you because they don't know you, but pretty much like, don't give anybody any reason to say anything other than that you are smart, you are successful, you are bright, you have the potential to do whatever.
Okay, so question.
Yeah.
What do you think the reasoning or motivation was for that response? Because is it fear? Is it worry? Is it a combination of things that I don't understand?
I think it was probably maybe some of those things, but I think that for them as Black people in America, they understood that you had to kind of show others that you could make it
Okay.
the Black person, and that maybe the stereotypes that existed or still exist around people of color or Black people in America, they were saying, you will probably have to work harder to prove yourself to people who think or assume different things about you. And so probably more out of we want to be sure that you don't play into their stereotypes, and that you help them understand who you are. So I think it was a little bit of a warning, kind of saying, hey, there's people out here who might assume certain things about you. You go ahead and prove them otherwise. And so right away, when you are the Black child so it was 5th grade, January of 5th grade. So like
your school picture and your yearbook just changed, didn't it?
Completely. Yeah. And it was so interesting because I remember getting to Westchester County and like that first, there was one other Black kid in my class. His name was Omar. They called him OJ or something like that. And it was like all of a sudden I got in the 5th grade and everyone was like, OJ, Erica should be your girlfriend. And
of course.
Being like, well,
perfect match, right? Oh, cow.
Right. And then, which then led to me and the other, once I got to high school, me and the other Black kid was my prom date. for junior prom. It's a like it just kind of was like these are the things that make sense. Academically, even I look back on my like academic journey and I feel like there were maybe some assumptions made about um truly like schooling and how it was best for me to learn or what classes I should take from the system that I was put into when I moved to Westchester County. So like right away, it was a completely like so getting back to your round hole, square peg, or whatever, whichever way it is you say it. Right there. I mean, it happened right away when we moved out of a very, very diverse melting pot of New York City to Westchester County. So,
That's so like I live in a world that is 98% Caucasian.
yeah,
You're never going to change that in the middle of Michigan, right?
true.
And now I can drive 45 miles to Saginaw, Lansing, Grand Rapids, wherever, or just to another college campus. And immediately
Mhm.
I'm caught in diversity.
Mhm.
But in my little village, I don't even live in a city, I live in a village. We're
Okay.
officially a village, like
Wow.
Anatevka in Fiddler on the Roof or something. We're a
Okay.
village with a high school of 350 kids,
Okay.
with a graduating class of 45. Um, now, I wasn't born and raised here. And so we came from Minneapolis,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
27 years ago. Now,
Yeah.
I have roots here. I was actually
Hmm.
born a little ways from here,
Okay.
but did plan on living back here. We had this mantra in our home to make the world our backyard, and not our backyard, our world for our kids. And we did. My
Hmm.
sons are well traveled and have connected and have friends of multiple ethnicities from multiple nations. And so when we have these conversations in our home,
Hmm.
my sons are like, I don't get it.
Hmm.
I don't get it, Dad. Like half the people you work with, half the people that rub shoulders with across the world, the people you bring into our home as guests who stay with us or come to board meetings in your little office in your little village of 1,000 people, um, they don't think, and I don't think, and I'm sure I'm wrong, but I don't think that for the most part, and I'm sure I'm wrong, I don't see race. Now, that may just sound like a really ignorant statement to people of color. Um, but what I'm interested in our conversation, which is a follow up from a conversation a couple years ago we
Yeah.
didn't ever get really deep in, is I want to know where I'm wrong, if I'm wrong,
Hmm.
and I want to know how to bridge gaps
Hmm.
because regardless of it's our giftings, our talents,
Hmm.
our backgrounds, our ethnicities, there's so much we can do, right? Because I also say
Hmm.
the same thing when people ask, like, hey, you're going to get different podcast guests on and this and that. I'm like, you have to remember. So, going back to your field of work, I come from
Hmm.
30 years of
Hmm.
white evangelical guys.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's who predominantly, 99%, run the field that you and I'm no longer directly in, but you are directly in.
Yeah.
And so when you walk into a room, you walk into a national meeting, you walk into a
Hmm.
regional meeting, you walk into someone's staff meeting, it is vanilla as vanilla can be, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And predominantly male. So we
Yeah.
got two issues here. We got a
Yeah.
gender issue here, we got
Yeah.
a racial issue here.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know why, right?
Hmm.
Um, I'm going to have a different perspective on why. Why? Of course I am, because I don't bring the perspective that you do.
Right.
And there's going to be part of me that wants to disagree with your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I may be right, but because I don't want to be wrong.
Sure.
I don't want to be that white guy.
Sure.
Because I look at other people and think, you are that white guy. You know, I listen to the way you talk. I listen to the way you respond to people. I listen to your preconceived ideas and
Yeah.
think that is certainly not me. Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, who wants to be associated with a thought that seems that it could be offensive,
Racist. Yeah. Racist,
racist,
offensive, whatever.
whatever you want to call it? Nobody wants to be associated with a
Right.
comment like that. And honestly, like um I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation like this with a friend. Um, I feel like and we're being authentic here and honest.
Yep, we are.
Part of that um is that what happens for me is I show up in those spaces, and then I am counted upon to help bring a perspective for a people group. I am counted on to help to check everybody else's blind spots in a room. Because I will say this, I have been everybody's safe Black friend most of my life. One, again, being conditioned in that you make sure nobody, you don't meet the stereotypes that people might put upon you. But
Mm-hmm.
here's what that said in a different way looks like. Hey, Erica, you're in fifth grade. You just came from living in the United Nations where you were exactly who you were among a lot of different kids. Now you move to a new town, fifth grade Erica. And why don't you begin to, as opposed to just being uniquely who you are, how about you become a little bit more like everybody else? Why don't you just
Sure.
assimilate to this dominant culture that exists in this new town and fit in? Because that's going to be easier and that's going to be better for you. You'll probably find success that way. And I think what's wrong with that conversation is you take away somebody's ability to be who they are, who they think
I
they are,
call it I call it
working to assimilate.
yeah, I call it sacrificing your authenticity.
Sure, right. You're
Right?
sacrificing.
You're sacrificing something of yourself, which never feels
Right,
good to sacrifice, right?
right. And so you're doing that so that you fit in, so that
Mm-hmm.
you can become or you can be thought of like others are thought of in a space. And so you assimilate to become like that group of people. And it's interesting because I have, showed up and do show up in this, the field of work that I'm in, show up and surrounded by evangelical, a lot of white men, and a sprinkling of white women.
A
As
sprinkling. That's a very
a
small
sprinkling,
sprinkling.
yeah, a sprinkling of white women. And like I said, there is this almost this expectation to, oh, well, you came here, you entered into this space, so you must be okay with this. You must be okay if I'm going to ask you a question that I'm curious about that may or may not offend you. I don't know.
Hmm.
And it's and it and though, and I always say this, and this is probably me kind of growing into myself and growing into my own confidence as I get older and mature and wiser. um, I have been working harder to be my own advocate in those spaces.
Yeah.
Let me like tell you about a situation that literally happened 2 days ago. So I was in Seattle for a conference. I'm not going to name the conference. I went to a conference, And similar space that we talked about, white evangelical male dominant. And I met the director, whoever was leading the conference when I got there, shook his hand. Great. Never met him before. Don't have a relationship with him.
I think I've spoken at this conference. Go on.
Okay. So good to see you. Great. Lovely. Happy to be there. Um, so anyway, 2 mornings ago, I was walking to my booth where we were exhibiting or our organization, and and he came out and said, he looked at me dead in the eyes and he says, "Hey, I might need to use you." Now, this is like 2 minutes before the main general session is starting. "Hey, I might need to use you." And then he goes on to say, "I need an African American woman
Wow.
part of something this morning." And I just kind of like stood there and I was like, wait, okay.
You didn't just instantly punch him in the throat,
I did not.
but you wanted to.
Kind of like in my head, I was like, is this like seriously happening to me at this moment? And so I stood there and I was like, okay, wait, tell me more. Cause I was kind of like, I didn't actually hear you correctly. And then he goes on to tell me that his Black woman or his African American woman who was supposed to play this role this morning didn't show up. And so now he's in a panic and he's in this frenzy and he needs me to fill in as a Black woman, African American woman on the
Yeah,
stage.
because this other token black woman that he
Didn't
had
show.
to make sure he had on the docket for the speaking list couldn't make it,
Didn't
and so
show up.
now he's in a panic.
He's in a panic. So then I said, I'm not able to be part of that this morning. And then I think it like clicked in his head. And he was like, well, gosh, I really think you probably would, you really are going to wish you were part of it. And I was like, I'm not going to be part of it this morning. And then it dawned on him that he was stereotyping and that he was tokenizing me. And he kind of like fumbled and he was like, oh gosh, I totally used the stereotype. Like, is this a stereotype?
Oh, he didn't just kind of use the stereotype. Let me tell you what he is. Because I love this new platform for myself because I get to swear. Um,
Oh, right.
you know, he is the epitome of a dumbass, right?
Uh-huh.
And now I don't want to cut off your story because it's actually kind of it's not unbelievable. It should be
Mhm.
unbelievable.
It should be unbelievable.
It should be unbelievable. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to something you said about your parents and something about this story, and I want to ask a couple of questions for my own clarification, and I think for
Yeah.
people listening for their clarification. Is it fair or unfair to say, or somewhere in the middle, that historically and 2 days ago, so not just two historically, but 2 days
Mm-hmm.
ago, that there are people who are that ignorant, that's
Mm-hmm.
ignorance, okay,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that can also potentially conjure up assumptions on you
Mm-hmm.
on people of color's part that all Caucasians are that ignorant. So therefore, be careful what you do, be careful what you say, be careful how you act, because we don't want people to make assumptions and
Mm-hmm.
pigeonhole you as a person of color
Mm-hmm.
when it may be a minority, it could be a
Mm-hmm.
majority, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever percentage of people who do make those assumptions, who do stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it fair to say that you could potentially make those assumptions or and not assume that there's a large majority of people who don't stereotype?
Sure. Um,
And I don't know whether that's right or wrong. I'm just wondering that because do we, if we say we, now we've created a us them situation, which I hate us them situations, in out situations, yes,
sure.
no situations. I really work hard in my whole life in general, not just this topic, to not be dualistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think that's a large part of our problem in faith, in
Sure.
culture. We have this duality:
Mm-hmm.
in, out, yes, no, right, wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so anyway, I don't want to divert too much. Do I make assumptions and stereotype? Probably more than I'd like to admit. Do you?
Right. Um, I can answer for myself.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's all I can ask you of you.
yeah. Here's what I have done in all of my years. I have figured out, and I figure this out pretty quickly, who are my safe white people?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people who want me to be their black
Isn't this a sad
person.
conversation, though? In general, this is just a sad conversation.
But it's true. I do
I
I
know it's true. It can be true, but that doesn't any less make it like just embarrassingly sad. Is
sure.
human being in his human being. So I
Right.
want you to
It's human
finish that. But
beings.
that's my
Right.
first thought though. Is like what a pathetic conversation we have to have. But I'm sure glad we're having it.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, truth be told, because of the conversation and the hurt around race in our country,
mm-hmm.
I find I have to figure out who are my safe white people.
Sure.
And let me tell you,
I hope you can list me on them someday, or just tell me someday when it, you just can look at me and go, Tim,
that's
right
awesome.
now you're just being a white guy. You know.
No. I feel like I can have this. I think honestly, being invited into the conversation is creates a little bit of a safe space for me. Um, in relationship, this conversation is safe. Um, Example, case in point, the guy who plucked me out of left field 2 days ago to like stand up on a stage knows nothing about me. He knows
Sure.
nothing about me.
He didn't
And
know what you're going to say, your expertise, how you deliver, I
right.
mean,
He
anything.
knows
He
nothing.
he picked you out because you have pretty skin.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And so he called me and that's not safe. He is not a safe white person, in my opinion.
very fair.
It's interesting because and I'm married to a white man. And he's clearly I married him and knowing that he's a safe white person for
I was
me.
going to ask. I was going to make sure.
Good, healthy relationship. He is a safe white person. Um, but here's what it comes down to. It comes down to work that, and I would say that individuals do on their own to step into a deeper understanding of difference and a deeper understanding of other. And when somebody in my life or that I come encounter with um, has been down a path to open themselves up to different other to yeah, just outside of a cultural comfort zone, um they become a little bit safer for me,
Mhm.
because there is a comfort level that I feel of knowing that um you have put yourself in a place to expose yourself to other ways of thinking, other cultures, other races, um, not because you were made to, but because you chose to.
Sure.
And um, and this doesn't have to be a conversation about the fact that I'm a black woman and you're a white man. This can just be a conversation about the fact that we have difference, and that
Yeah.
in difference, you see my difference, and you see my difference, and you value it. And I think that that's a huge part. And I want to kind of go back to something you said a little bit ago around kind of this comfort of like, when people come into my house, I don't really see their race, um, which is honestly sometimes hard to hear, if we're being honest. And I say that as in that if you don't see my race, or you don't see, do you do you see me just like you see, like, am I you? Because then you don't potentially see that my journey, no matter what, is different as a woman, period.
Well, I
That
think that I like the point you're making here. I think that is a great clarification,
yeah.
which I go back and I consider what I said and think, Hmm. That's kind of a ignorant comment, right? Because I think I like to see the difference in everybody. So let's see if I can. I don't want to backpedal from that comment because I
Sure.
think I need to learn to say that better. Um, I wonder if what I mean in not having the words, haven't chose words well. So this is great education for me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that of course I see your race, right? I see
Mm-hmm.
your gender, I see your gifts and your uniqueness,
Mm-hmm.
and I value all of them. But I guess I'm saying I don't see that in such a way that it's a division. It's a diversity,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a
Mm-hmm.
division. As though, I would never define you walking through my house as Erica, my black female friend,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I would say
Right.
this is Erica. Not that I wouldn't look across the room and someone says, "Hey, so which one is Erica?" Well,
Mm-hmm.
I would. She's one of the gray sweater. No, she's not the one in the gray sweater. 'Cause 10 people can be in the gray sweater, but if you're the only black woman standing there, I'm going to identify you as black. No different than if I'm standing in a whole room of people of color and I'm the only one. You're going to go, that white guy over there. Oh,
Right.
when that's not offensive to
Right.
me, nor do I
Right.
think in the context that's offensive to you either.
Right. Right.
As
And
long as I'm not using it to divide us.
right. And I do think that there's an importance in that, is that there is this the kind of the I'm colorblind, or I don't see color, I don't see race, um, has a very painful legacy
Hmm.
attached to that comment around I don't and it's kind of interpreted as a I don't see you. And not only
Hmm.
not see you, is that like I'm choosing to believe that you see the world as I see it, and that you experience the world as I experience, which completely devalues the experience of another person, whether they be a person of color or whether they be of opposite gender or different sexual orientation. It's like there's difference all here between us. I see you being different than me. And I don't have to create, it doesn't have to create a division, but it actually creates an opportunity. It creates a depth of relationship that helps again. I will never be a white man, but I mean, I sure think that I can look through your lens because I do a lot.
Well, you've been forced
I
to,
do. Right. I've
right?
been forced to, right?
Okay, so I really like the point you made there, and I appreciate you making it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because when you are number one, living in a place that's, or a field, or a nation, or whatever it might be, is number one, male dominated and
Mm-hmm.
white male dominated,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to even choose the right words in this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
or different words, because I've never had to.
Mm-hmm. That's a good
I've
point.
never. I've never had to.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, isn't
which is why it makes it such. I think it's why it makes it so interesting for people to go,
mm-hmm.
I'm not racist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, innately, you just might be and not even
Mm-hmm.
know it, not because you're racist, like hatred racist. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what people hear, because people hear the word racist and they immediately think that's evil, that's bad, that's terrible. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
racist. I don't want to destroy anyone's
Mm-hmm.
life because of the color of their skin. And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes in this argument, and I hate to say argument, but conversation about people are innately racist,
Mm-hmm.
I think in the same way that I can't see things always
Mm-hmm.
through somebody else's eyes because I haven't walked in their shoes, I need to choose my words different. I think the racism word also creates division
Mm-hmm.
because innately it means, um, yeah, evil, bad,
Mm-hmm.
hatred, cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe there's a better way to explain, or a different choice of words that would bridge the gap so that people were speaking the same language. There's certain things I say that automatically build a barrier. And
Mm-hmm.
there may be certain words that people of color say that automatically build a barrier. And all of a sudden, like,
Mm-hmm.
we can't have the conversation because you think I'm a racist.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to redefine or even talk about a different word. Not that I'm afraid of that word, right? But I think it does create a barrier to a real conversation among
Mm-hmm.
people.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I could be wrong. I'm wrong about a lot of stuff.
I think that that word is I do think that people are afraid of that
Oh, I
word.
do too. I do too.
Um, and rightly so, because it's a horrible, awful thing to be a racist. However, everybody has been somewhat racist in their life, right?
Right.
And and
Regardless
there
of,
are
regardless of race. Regardless of race.
right,
Correct.
exactly. And I think that it's kind of like you kind of just need to call it like a spade, right? Like you just need to call racism racism and call it for what it is. And I don't honestly know that there's a better word for
There
race.
may not be. There
I
may not
don't
be.
think that there is. I
Okay.
think that um, I think that when people start understanding and seeing that, oh gosh, I didn't realize what I said was racist. Was racist. Okay, like understanding that you said something that was racist is behind and but I think that there's like an understanding and an awareness of saying, oh yeah, that there's like I did say that and geez, but my am I is what's behind those words. And I think that people are afraid of having this kind of conversation because they are afraid that what they might say is racist or what they might say um, would label them as a racist.
And they may get labeled before they can have a real conversation, right? To
Right.
understand the motivation, or I had
Mm-hmm.
no idea that was a racist comment. But
Mm-hmm.
immediately, if you get put into a category, like you and I can have a just a gut level conversation with
Mm-hmm.
no animosity, no judgment, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's really good in a private
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But this issue has been made so public.
Mm-hmm.
It should be public because that brings awareness and light to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like social media. It's kind of like news. As soon
Mm-hmm.
as it's out there, boom, we
Mm-hmm.
we draw conclusions and we put people into a camp before that camp got to converse about anything to create clarity and
Mm-hmm.
build a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that. We don't use that. We just don't do that in race, right? We do that
Oh,
in
we do that in everything.
politics. We do that in
Right.
religion. We do that in
Everything.
everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this one is so critical, I
Mm-hmm.
think, to humanity. I really do. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I
Mm-hmm.
think this one is so critical to unity that
Mm-hmm.
I hope people want. I mean, some days I don't think people really want it. I think it's just really good sound bites. But you and I both know how important it is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yet at the same time, so I'm just processing all kinds of things right now, and I'm thinking, well, can I say this? Can I not say this? Well, I know I can say it with you, but I don't want to. I want to say it well. Um,
Well, because you are being recorded, Tim. Don't forget that.
well, then we're going to put it out on Apple and Spotify and everywhere else. So that's fine.
Oh, man.
Somebody can use it against me, and I'm fine with
Mm-hmm.
that, as long as as long as they hear the context. Oh, like my wife will say, they're going to take like that sound bite you've got pretty
Mm.
soon. I'm like, well, you know, what am I going to do about it? I'm not going to stop the recording.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't. I kind of lost my train of thought there because I'm
Sorry.
so. No, no, don't be sorry. Yeah, I'm having all kinds of thoughts about. Um, I'm second guessing myself. I don't second guessing myself on my motivation. but I'm guessing myself on my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
because I only can come at things from one point of view. I've never, like you say, you've had to look through my eyes, literally my
Mm-hmm.
eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and function in that world.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
100%.
I've never had to do that unless like I was the guest in some, Kenya for 3
Mm-hmm.
weeks.
Yeah.
And even that
Yeah.
was no big deal because I'm just a guest. I'm not living there. I'm not working there. I'm not existing there. I'm
Right.
visiting there. Well, you're not a visitor.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a
Yep.
visitor in my
Right.
culture. You
Right.
you are you are a stranger and an alien trying to fit in.
Yep. All,
Interesting.
all the
Interesting,
time.
Erica.
Yeah. And I think that it to me there is a a kind of going back to the, am I saying the right thing? Is there a better way to say this? Should I say it differently than I've said it before? It is, so much more about a are you saying something, right? As opposed to saying nothing. Um, are you in a relationship with somebody who is really inherently different than you are?
Hmm.
And in that conversation, are you safe to say what you might feel like you might not supposed to say? You might, maybe you might say it wrong. And there's going to be a willingness to say, hey, I'm going to actually help you think through that differently. So to me, it's about relationships that are
Which, by the way, you've already done for me in this conversation. You've already
Mhm.
said, okay, just a minute. Just a minute. It is the right word, you moron. You just didn't say moron. And made me go back and reflect on that,
Mhm.
you know. And
Yeah.
either in this conversation or after this conversation, I'm going to ask you, like, okay, what else did I say? Because I don't want to be that, right? I don't
Mhm.
want to be that.
Well,
That's
it's
not what I
interesting.
stand for. Those are not my values.
Right. But I think that the difference here between you and I, again, it goes back to me existing, having to. I have had no choice but to figure out how to speak your language in
Hmm.
a business setting, in a ministry setting, in an academic setting. I have had to speak your language.
True. Yeah.
Have you had to speak mine? Meaning, have you had
Mm-mm.
to walk into a room and really kind of look around the room to count the other people who look like you? Or have you thought twice about speaking, because you might not be quite as articulate as you want to be in the moment, and that might be paired with your skin tone and look like an inadequate thing to add to the conversation. So it's all of those, and I think that that's kind of this like interesting. um Let me tell you this: by the time I have walked into an event and been there for like 2 minutes, I have picked out every other brown face, whether that be an Asian American face, a Latino face, a Black face. I have picked them out and figured out how many are there who are like me, and likely have like made an eye contact with those people and given like a subtle like, I see you, you see me. um or even being in an event with another woman where you walk in and you are the only other woman. But here's like the interesting thing that happens as a woman, and I'd be curious to know if other women experience this as well. But I have noticed that there's this like subtle, like, especially when I'm in a room with like one other white woman, um,
Hmm.
kind of like I made my way, like almost like I'm one of the guys, so don't treat me like a woman in this setting. I'm like these guys because I made it here. I don't know about you, but I'm like, and that's weird. I mean, like for me personally, like I was at an event this fall and it was a business event, which I don't walk into like corporate events all the time, but she was like, listen, I mean, and these are all like this is the story I told myself. I will own that. But this is what I picked up from the body language, from the subtle, like, there wasn't a like, hey, let's have camaraderie because we are the women who made it to this room. It was the woman and the other woman in the room saying, like, don't pick me out. Don't act like we are buddies because we're women. In this setting, I'm as tough as all the males in this room. I'm as articulate as all the males in this room. I am as powerful as all the men. Because by this potential of us finding a moment of solidarity together as women, we might diminish our role in this room of white men. So again, that's the story that I'm telling myself about that subtle, non, like, it wasn't a warm welcome of like, hey girl, we're in this together. It was like a,
Wow, that is a very different, right? That's very different than walking in and finding solidarity with somebody from one perspective. Wow.
Yeah.
Erica, I thought
weird.
I like to think like we all do. Like I like to think I'm 185 and handsome and trim too, but that's a lie. That's why I wear black all the time, because I feel like, it's very slimming, covers a multitude
cool
of
haircut.
sins. What haircut? I haven't had a haircut in over a year.
I mean, last time I saw you was a lot shorter.
Cindy's like, it's a mullet. I said, no. In order to have a mullet, you've got to have hair in the front. And so I probably will soon just whack it off. But I said, what the heck? It's just hair.
Why not?
I went through enough stuff in my life where it just, like recently, it's like, it's just hair.
Yeah.
I like to tell myself certain things about me. I love to lie to myself, right? Now, I don't say that because I'm the only one. We prefer the lie.
Mm-hmm.
We preferred the lie since the beginning of creation. We always prefer the lie. It's a good place to hide. Or it's a good place to avoid.
Yeah, that's good.
Dealing with the truth. I'm not sure that we lie to ourselves it's either intentional or innate. I think there's both. I do think there is a real innate sense of that for protection. We all like to protect ourselves, sometimes from ourselves, and or from pain, not fitting in. So when I say that, I think that I have every good intention. I think my motivations are pure, and yet even as conscious as I'd like to think I am about this topic, I'm not near as educated as I like to pretend. And I think I'm a lot more educated than most people. And yet
you are.
There's a massive gap. And you are challenging my thinking, not like in a way like I'm like going, no way. No. I thought I was probably here. I'm probably down here. I hope to get to here in this particular conversation, and I've got lots to learn. And
well, it's interesting.
You don't make me feel like I'm stupid by not being there yet.
Well, and I think
but it is embarrassing. I will tell you that it is embarrassing in this conversation to think, I used to not think I was quite as ignorant about some things.
Here's an interesting way to think about it, and this is through the lens of my husband, my white husband, who is in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And he basically use a tool that measures like your comfort level with difference. And you can be all the way on one side of a spectrum of polarization, all the way to the other side of a spectrum of adaptation. And in the middle, there is minimization, There is, oh gosh, I feel like there might be two other steps along this, like this spectrum, but it's a spectrum, right? And I think that that is what I like about the tool that they use. It's not saying that you are polarizing, therefore you will always live in polarization. You will always think that other people are the opposite, and just like you will disassociate yourself with the other. Um, but you could be in polarization today. I'm not saying that you are, but I'm saying somebody could be in polarization today, find themselves making their journey towards minimization, which minimization is kind of that idea that we're all the same, like race, it's kind of a thing. Like we know that, there's difference. We know that there's different political thought. We know that there's different religious thought. We know that there's, but I just love people, right? Like kind of minimization. And then adaptation, again, he's the coach. I'm not my profession, but there's this other spectrum. And what I love about the work that they do is it's like, really, it's just thinking, like intentionally entering into relationships with different people that actually help us move along a spectrum around difference, where we become more adaptive and understanding of difference, and we become more understanding of other. Therefore, it's not a good end or a bad end. It's a developing end of where we all are.
I would think that at some point you can be polarized, minimized, adapting all at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I imagine this
And that's
different
probably not a
topics.
bad thing, right? That's different topics, even on just one topic, even on the topic of race. You
Mm-hmm.
could be in some areas you may be moving the needle, and other you could be stuck there with one point of
Mm-hmm.
view, one perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And I probably not only that, as it relates to race, as it relates to politics, um,
sure.
as it relates to
Anything, right? Absolutely
anything.
anything at this moment, because we have such a polarizing world, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I think of the many things that I am walking away from is the idea that it's important to see the differences
Mm-hmm.
and to value the differences. And that's regardless of this conversations about race, faith, relationships, politics, gender, or sexual orientation, that matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and to acknowledge what I bring to the table, what you bring to the table, regardless of that is an education,
Mm-hmm.
experience, whether that experience is based upon culture, you
Mm-hmm.
know, doesn't matter. And not discount that,
Right.
you know, and
Yep.
not discount that until though my experience or perspective does alienate and doesn't value,
Right.
right? But
Going back.
I do bring a perspective as a white 50 something male that has value
Yes.
until my value, I think, supersedes yours.
And let me go back to that story that I told you about 2 days ago, because there was an apology in the moment, but then there was an apology later. And that apology was, I 100% accepted the apology and I was grateful for it. However, the apology led to um, to a little bit of that. Um, oh gosh, now you're offending me again. So probably just be done talking. That's probably going to be better for you to just be done. Use
So
no more
some kind of
words.
justification in the apology.
There was some justification, and I
Yeah,
thought,
yeah.
shoot, um, now you have devalued an apology, and you are trying to help me see it from your perspective, as opposed to just saying that my perspective of being offended by you calling me out as the Black woman at your event to come on stage for you. And I said, no, you are now justifying why you did that, even though you're sorry for calling on me for, and I'm like, shoot, thank you. And still, apology accepted. But will this be one of my safe white people? No.
Well, and that's no different than any apology. When you give me an apology with a but, it wasn't an apology. So right now you're being very gracious, right? You're being very gracious because it wasn't really an apology.
It was until it wasn't.
It was until it wasn't. So here's my question as I'm going to bring us to a close. What have I ignorantly said today that I need to apologize for?
Jim, there is nothing that you need to apologize for. Is at least that I can recall from top of mind. Because again, I think that I value the fact that you and I get to have a dialogue. And that though, and like I said, I'm really working on advocating for myself in these conversations with people. And knowing that I'd like to have these conversations in the context of relationship outside of the, oh, hey, you're the brown face in the room, so I'll ask you these questions that I've always had. And that's where I find offense. That's where I find frustration and hurt. Again, because I show up in these spaces with an expectation to, well, Erica will give voice to that. Or tell us what you think. And I've had to intentionally not show up in some places at certain, over the last 2 years. I live in Minneapolis where George Floyd was murdered. And there are places that I couldn't show up in the last year because I did not want to have to speak on what was very personal for me in this city. And so like I said, I am finding liberty to say no. Again, not at the cost of my professional responsibilities that I have. But to say no for the sake of not being what somebody else needs me to be for them.
So. I'm glad you're finding that freedom or the strength, or maybe it's tenacity. Because a lot of people don't have that in their life in general. They go along to get along, which I think is what breeds a lack of authenticity, which is why I call it, living in an artificial world. I think conversations like this create authentic relationship. I'd like to continue this conversation because I don't think having it 1, 2, 3 times with a few people is enough, because the systemic element of it is in our DNA. Regardless of what the issue is, it's literally, this is just too much for us to get in, but it'd be a great conversation. We pass our points of view on to our children through our DNA, scientifically proven. And people have a tough time believing that. It's just not culture. It's,
right.
It's sperm and egg. It just comes right through. But so the conversation needs to continue. But I have learned a lot today, and we're not going to leave people with steps 1, 2, 3. If they can't discern some of the conversation and apply it to their life, which I'm sure they can. I'd like to believe that I've got a really intelligent audience, probably much more intelligent than the host. Erica Schimelpfenig, my safe black friend. I have safe black friends. President of youthworks.com. And if you're looking for an amazing experience for students to make a difference in the world, go to youthworks.com. Erica gives leadership to that with a amazing team. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tim. It's been an awesome honor getting to chat with you.